All right, welcome to the Explainer. Today, we're following the money, specifically the money flowing through the massive U.S. immigration enforcement system. We're going to uncover how this complex world of detention has ballooned into a multi-billion-dollar industry, and it's tied up with some of the biggest financial names you can imagine. So, how do you even begin to build a deportation machine on the scale we're seeing today? Well, the story here doesn't really start with a new policy or some piece of legislation. It starts with a price tag, a really, really big one. To get this whole thing off the ground, this massive permanent system for detention and removal, a truly unprecedented amount of our money, public money, was put on the table. And here it is, $170 billion. Just let that sink in for a second. This wasn't some line item in a budget. This was a massive pile of cash allocated over 4 years, all from one major enforcement bill. We're talking about the single largest investment in immigration enforcement in the history of the United States. And the goal? To completely reshape the entire system from the ground up. Okay, so what does $170 billion buy you? It buys you a target, and that target is 100,000. That's the goal for the daily population of immigration detainees. Now, to give you some perspective, that is more than double the average number from just a couple of years ago. So this isn't just about holding a few more people. This is about building the capacity, the sheer infrastructure for a mass removal campaign. So you have to ask, right, who are all these people filling up these detention beds? And this might surprise you. Almost 3/4, 74.2% of the people detained by ICE have no criminal record whatsoever. A lot of them are folks who have lived here for years, just targeted in community arrests. Which brings us to the big question we're tackling today. Where is all that money actually going? And more importantly, who is getting rich from it? All right, let's get into it. First up, building the new detention machine. We're going to take a look at the just unbelievable scale of the system that this budget is creating. Okay, to really wrap your head around this, let's put it in perspective. The annual budget for ICE detention alone is now 62% larger than the entire budget for the Federal Bureau of Prisons. You know, the agency that houses all federal criminals? And get this, the Bureau of Prisons is responsible for more than double the number of people that ICE is even aiming to detain. The level of spending here, it's just on a whole other planet. So that funding? It's like pouring rocket fuel into an engine. The system is just firing on all cylinders. The number of detainees has absolutely exploded. We're talking an 84% jump year over year. The number of facilities being used has nearly doubled, and people are being booked into the system at a truly dizzying pace. But at the exact same time, one of the main release valves, getting out on bond, has been basically shut off. It's almost impossible now. And this right here, this shows you the economic choice that's being made, plain as day. You see, there are alternatives to locking people up, and they can cost as little as $8 a day. But that's not the path being taken. Instead, the whole system is built to prioritize putting people in a physical cell, which costs around $165 a day per person. That is a 20 times increase in cost. It's a choice. So let's get to the crucial point here. This giant fire hose of government money has kicked off what people inside the industry are calling a gold rush. A gold rush for private companies. See, this isn't just some government program. It's a full-blown, for-profit enterprise. Just look at this. It's really stark. Somewhere between 80 and 90%. Think about that. 80 to 90% of all immigration detainees in the U.S. are being held in facilities run by private, for-profit companies. The government has essentially outsourced the job of incarcerating immigrants. And when we talk about this private market, it's not really a diverse marketplace. It's pretty much a duopoly. You've got two giant players, the GEO Group and CoreCivic. These two companies control the vast majority of all private detention beds in the country, and you can bet their revenues have absolutely soared as they've dusted off old facilities to meet this new government demand.
Okay, but let's keep following the money. Who's behind GEO Group and CoreCivic? Who actually owns them? Well, let's pull back the curtain on GEO Group's biggest shareholders. And look at that. The top two names are BlackRock and the Vanguard Group. We're not talking about small-time investors. These are two of the biggest asset managers on the entire planet.
All right, so what about CoreCivic? Let's check their shareholders. And, yep, same story. BlackRock and Vanguard, right at the top again. Now here's what that actually means. The profits generated by detaining people, they flow directly into the massive index funds and retirement accounts that are held by millions and millions of regular people, maybe even you. Okay, on to our next section. Inside the revolving door.
Because this whole financial setup, it's made even stronger by a really powerful, and some would say cozy, relationship between the government officials and the private companies they're supposed to be overseeing.
You know, there's a name for this kind of tangled web of public and private interests. Observers have borrowed a term from another famous partnership between government and industry. They call it the deportation industrial complex. And it's the perfect description for how government policy and corporate profit have become so intertwined that they've created a system that literally profits from its own expansion.
And a key part of how this works is something called the revolving door. Here's a textbook example for you. There's a guy named Daniel A. Bible. He was a career official at ICE, the guy in charge of all detention operations. He leaves his government job and immediately, literally immediately, becomes an executive vice president at GEO Group. That's ICE's biggest private contractor, the very company he was just regulating. And this happens right as these massive new contracts are being signed.
And listen, this isn't some one-off thing. The reports make it clear this happens all the time. And think about what that does. It gives these companies priceless insider knowledge. They get a direct line into how the agency thinks, what it needs, what it's planning. It lets them anticipate and maybe even help shape what the government is going to ask for next. It's the perfect way to make sure the contracts just keep on coming.
Of course, there's also the old-fashioned way to secure influence. Good old-fashioned money in politics. We're talking about millions of dollars in political donations from these companies. And, as you can see, this isn't a partisan issue. The money flows freely to key politicians on both sides of the aisle, especially to the ones who happen to sit on the very committees that hold the purse strings and write the rules for their industry. So when you put it all together, what do you have? You've got long-term, locked-in funding. You've got deep, deep ties between corporations and government, and you have powerful political influence. The result is a system that has this incredible inertia. It's almost designed not to be stopped. It is, quite literally, built to last. And that 4-year funding structure we talked about, that is absolutely key. It means billions of dollars are locked in, guaranteed every single year through 2029. What that does is it takes the whole issue off the table for yearly budget debates. It just happens. And that's how this massive new infrastructure becomes a permanent, baked-in part of the federal budget. And what you end up with is this powerful, self-perpetuating cycle. It's like a machine that feeds itself. The government mandates more enforcement, which means more detainees. That creates huge profits for the private companies, which makes their big-name shareholders very happy. A chunk of those profits then gets recycled into political influence, which helps create, you guessed it, new government mandates for more enforcement. Round and round it goes. But you have to remember, a decision to spend $170 billion on this means you're not spending it on something else, and that's the opportunity cost. This massive enforcement funding was passed at the same time as major cuts were happening to social programs. We're talking about a fundamental shift in what the nation chooses to spend its money on.
Which really leaves us with one final and, I think, critical question to think about. When you build a system that is designed for permanence, a system where profit is a primary engine, who is it that ultimately pays the price? Thanks for joining this explainer.